So, welcome everyone to another XYZ workshop. This evening, we are very lucky to have Jeremy Estrellado, lead environment artist at Ubisoft Massive, who is going to talk to you all about the importance of your portfolio. I think this talk is something that everyone, every artist certainly will get something from. And so, I think you're going to get something very useful from the presentation that follows. So, Jeremy, over to you.
Hello. It's a pleasure to see you all. Well, I can't see you all because I've got my whatever this window is in PowerPoint that lets me know what's coming next. But yes, I'm going to talk to you about what your or understanding what your portfolio is saying and things you can do to make your portfolio shine a bit more. Also, not make it so crazy. So yeah, let's jump into this. So your portfolio says, what do you want to be? Right? It tells you, it tells us, it tells the person that is looking at your portfolio what you want to be. It also tells us what where your skills are at. It's a presentation, right? So if we look at thumbnails, for example, I've got some artists that I've contacted and are allowing me to use their portfolios and their thumbnails and their artwork to kind of give some examples and how portfolios are perceived and what you can do in order to make yours kind of look more unified. So, for example, with these two portfolios, oh, and also this PowerPoint, I'll make sure to give to Paul because I've linked everything in here as well. So, but yeah, so with these two portfolios, you can see you've got one that's very stylized, cartoony, very colorful, and the one that's much more in the territory of serious, as well as some like games that have been or a game that's been shipped. So with games shipped, it's much easier for thumbnails to be unified just because you get the little icon here or the logo of the game, which helps unify thumbnails really easily. Now, when you don't have that, there's a number of things that you can do in order to make your thumbnail work. And when you're looking at a portfolio overall, with like as you build your portfolio out, you're going to get more and more thumbnails, right? So trying to work on consistency of either value or saturation with the thumbnails that are next to each other is probably the best way to try and make your portfolio look like a unified experience or like a theme that's behind you. Um, yeah, so the next thing I wanted to kind of look at when it comes to thumbnails is framing. So with Jasmine's work, of course, my frames are not going to be as good as hers, but her original image for the thumbnail of this scene uh, shows the entire environment. And I don't know if you guys feel the same way that I do, but when you work with a thumbnail that's squared, it becomes very difficult to frame a scene that we're trying to get in thirds for most of the project, right? So some of the techniques that I would suggest using are either going in really close or focusing on very specific areas or even just pulling back and just kind of trying to reframe the image itself. So like in these examples, I'm just pulling from some of her other renders. But of course, if you have the scene, you'd be able to frame it a lot better. But you can choose what the viewer is focusing on. And when you're thinking about thumbnails, you really want to push for understanding what you're showing as well as making the viewer want to click to see more, right? So these these thumbnails are of course square, so they have to like conform to this format, this Instagram format. And for the most part, it can be quite difficult for people early on. And what I would suggest doing is just taking your renders, um, converting them to like a smart object, which maybe after I get through this PowerPoint, I can go through, and then just scaling it around and moving it around with like a mask that is just like a square frame. And you can just search around for interesting compositions or areas to focus on. But yeah, thumbnails are, I would say, the first like barrier of entry. If you can get someone to click it, you've already, in my opinion, have won. Like they've gone to your portfolio, they're looking at your art, and they start clicking through your portfolio. So let's talk about the project post itself. It's like the meat and potatoes, as Matthew O'Halloran would say. Um, so what it usually breaks down to is main images, supporting images, technical breakdowns, asset breakdowns, project description, and credits. And you might ask, like, how many is too many? Because this is something you'll see in portfolios uh, time and time again, where it's just a wall of images, just boom, 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 boom. You want to show everything, right? You want to really show off what's going on. And I've kind of put some rough numbers on there. Usually, I would suggest one main image, which is like that should be what your thumbnail is as well, because you want people to really be rewarded for clicking the thumbnail that they were curious about and then seeing it immediately. That should be the first image. Um, that can be a little different if it's like a video, for example. But I would say one main image or video, supporting images, which are just kind of maybe different angles of a scene, 1 to 3, technical breakdowns, 1 to 2, asset breakdowns, 1 to 2, and then your project description on the side. Don't ignore that. And your credits, which is like tagging people that or asset packs that you've used to just kind of help um, kind of cover all of the bases when it comes to the content that you utilize that wasn't yours to begin with. Now, if you were to go to the max with all these, that'd be 1, 3, so it's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That'd be 8 images, which is already, if you think about it, that whole image is like basically the size of a website page, right? So you want to be careful because 8 images is essentially scrolling down 8 monitors. You don't want the scrolling fatigue, uh, which I don't know if anyone's heard of that. I don't know, Paul, if you've heard of that. Scrolling fatigues
Mm-hmm.
is a real thing, and you don't really realize that you're in it. You just kind of you start skipping images to get to the bottom, or you just go to the next part of the portfolio. And if that's the only thing on your portfolio, they've now skipped who knows how many images. Um, but yeah, so I'm going to dive into each one of these categories just so that it's kind of clear what each one means. So we've got images, which is your main renders and supporting renders. And again, we've got the hunt game. And usually your main image is like the eye catcher. It's like the one that it's like that establishing shot for a scene. And if it's not a scene, if it's just a diorama, it's like the main angle you want to show, or the prop. It's the main, it's it's the main image. Supporting images are usually just expanding on the scene. And if it's a diorama, you may be zooming in or expanding on a smaller piece of that diorama. But I would expect supporting images gets kind of minimal if you're doing like a diorama or a single prop. So this doesn't really cover all bases. It just kind of highlights the overall. Now, when it comes to breakdowns, technical breakdowns and asset breakdowns. Oh man, this is cold. Um, yes, so technical breakdowns. I don't have any crazy examples, but just looking at like node structures is not going to be as interesting as actually seeing it in action. So like more interesting in motion, right? Videos or GIFs, totally fine. I would love to see like what you've built in action. How does your vertex paint work? Because there's vertex paint that just paints from one material to another, and then there's really complex vertex painting, which is blending using like height maps and has like other subtle nuances that are being powered by vertex paint as like the core, but it expands from there, right? So showing your shaders in a more interactive way, or blueprints, and controlling your sliders to show like what you were able to set up and why it was valuable to you for your scene is, in my opinion, very important. So asset breakdowns. So this one's from Pixelbyte. Actually, was just in a review recently, and I really liked the presentation of the content for even just a single asset. This asset's really good, by the way. So if you don't know this artist, definitely follow them. They have really nice details when it comes to surface definition. But when it comes to looking at assets, um, you wanna see wireframes, and I used to not really say that. I usually was like, oh, just make the art; it'll look cool. But if you want to be a props artist, for example, or you want to be working in an industry that prides itself on being as optimized as it can be while also looking awesome, it's your wireframes that are really going to show, say, a props lead if you're applying for a props position, what you're what you're capable of doing. And this also is looking at your UV sharing. So UV sharing's overlapping UVs. So you can see in the image, this one with the orange. The orange is either tileable materials or it's a duplicated piece. Like for example, this piece here. I don't know. Can you guys see my mouse?
No.
No. Oh man. Okay. Can I? I'm not gonna mess with it. Okay. So the image in the upper middle part is shared UVs. So where it's orange, it's shared, right? So you can see like a bracket on the left side of the top piece uh, is not shared, but then the little bolts are. That bracket is then duplicated wherever those brackets need to be on the asset, and you're just reusing already baked information as well as texture information, which in the end leads to a higher resolution asset as well. Now, when we're looking at texture maps, I want to see all of this as well. So I want to see your UVs. I want to see what your albedo looks like. I want to see what your normal looks like. What does your metallic map look like, and your packed channels, for example. And the reason I find this information really interesting is it lets me understand where you're at in your skill level with your understanding of PBR. The channel packing maps, like below we have ARM. Some people won't know what that abbreviation is. I would suggest spelling it out, just because if you don't, like, I mean, maybe they'll think A is some type of albedo and not ambient occlusion, and R is what do we call it, Ben? Roofness and not roughness. It's a completely made up map. Don't worry. Um, yeah, so it's really understanding what those maps are and spelling it out, at least in the presentation, could be valuable. Uh, the next thing I wanted to talk about is, this is pretty simple, but it's just the description and credit. So I see this actually not written in correctly often, or there's credit there, but it could be expanded on or built in a way that helps get visibility to that person or marketplace, for example. So if they're on ArtStation, if you use uh, their HTTP, you have to like spell it out with the triple W and the artstation.com and the username, and then you'll get the little bookmark on the right image that I'm pointing at. Whereas if like you don't put the code at the front, it just becomes text. If there's a lot of people to credit, that could be useful. But I think seeing it presented in that way gives the viewer the ability to actually see, oh, that person's an art director as well, or oh, this is a character artist. So it gives them more validated credit. But yeah, always make sure to credit marketplace content and other artists, as we're all kind of in this together. But yes, so on to some things that I look for. So it's the good and the need improvement. Oh, water, it's magical. Um, yeah, so let's look at composition. So I've got this from the Composition of Outdoor Painting by Edgar Payne. And this is a really good way of understanding, like at a base level, just thinking about composition. Like you can use these shapes, and they can help you kind of just come up with some really easy framing. So you're not like, oh my gosh, what am I gonna compose, right? So I've got a few bit of examples here. These ones by Edgar Martinez. So these are really cool. I put these in here because I know Paul likes Last of Us, so had to do that for you. So and of course, talk to Edgar about it. He was super down, and I just grabbed whatever images looked interesting and then try to apply those compositional framings on top of them. So if we fade these out and then just kind of draw on them, you can see like where the thought process is, and we could go back to if we want here, just so you can see it a little better. And I would argue, like I was looking at this a little bit later and wanted to say that the rectangular one, the middle at the top, could also be uh, the diagonal. Oh man, I didn't hang on here. There we go. It could be the diagonal line, which is the bottom center, going but flipped.
That's really interesting to see, actually, the overlays.
Yeah, it's something I was like, oh man, we don't talk about composition enough, other than we say that's an interesting composition, or your composition needs adjusting. You
Mm-hmm.
know, um, oh man,
It's all good.
but yes. So we've got composition kind of like at least a base understanding of it, and it doesn't have to be too complicated. It can literally be these simple shapes illustrated in the way that you've framed your shots. The next one I would say is scale, and scale is is really interesting because it's often one of the early things that people miss on, or like you see something is just very wrong, you don't know why, and it's usually things like scale. Uh, so with these two scenes, or I think this is two scenes. The two left ones are one scene, and then the right one is another scene. It's a group project of the two on the top right. Uh, they basically built these scenes, and I just kind of drew over them to think about like, okay, these are the areas I usually look at. I start paying attention to like, okay, how wide is something, and then how wide or how tall is something next to something else. So you need a frame of reference when it comes to scale. I put dimensions.com up on the top right there because that website is super intriguing. It's basically dimensions of all types of things. It started out as just IKEA stuff, and then it would just expand it into like, what's the dimension of a toilet? And it's it's very detailed. So if you ever need to find out measurements, dimensions.com is very good. But I just wanted to highlight how easy it is to uh, get something to be the right size and then use that object as your frame of reference to everything else. So like the chair on the left there, uh, the height of it needs to make sure that those arms can go under the table, right? Even if even if we all know that you could raise a chair and make it too high and then the arms won't go, it just looks strange if it doesn't look like it'll work. And this is one of the main reasons that everyone always suggests to add a character into your scene. You want to you want to make sure that objects are the right size. Like I'll drag a character into a scene and just put the prop in the hand of the character to make sure that it looks like the character could hold it. Because you now that you have that frame of reference, that context of the scale of a hand, it becomes much easier to get that across. So yeah, don't forget dimensions.com. So the next thing I wanted to kind of hit on is storytelling and lighting. So this is from Martin, and his work does a really good job of layering a lot of information in a very natural way. And it's stories in the world. It's the world story. It's guiding the eye. It's adding another layer of complexity into the composition. So not only can you find like a diagonal composition on the top left image, but you also have a circle around where the foliage is because of how the lighting is framing it. So now you've actually got two frames of composition overlapping on top of each other, which is it just naturally makes you enjoy it a little bit more. Uh, and with lighting, of course, guiding the eye, like I was saying, it's you look at the table, the workbench table, and then okay, what's the room on the left? You've got the warm and the cold lighting. And I was saying stories in the world, and that's just thinking about okay, this place is abandoned. Where is that? Where did all the stuff go? It probably didn't go very far if it was abandoned, right? And so you can tell stories with those assets, but also remember that what the world is doing in the scene can bring much more reality to the scene itself. So, for example, the world story is the foliage that you're seeing in the top left, and how it grows, where it started, why it started there, how it like expands across and gradients to nothing, to where it just hasn't gotten to yet. That speaks volumes to like how much understanding the artist has of abandoned locations, but also an understanding of what looks natural, what things do we subconsciously see that make us go, oh wow, this is something special, because it's much more uh, natural looking, more authored, but in a way that looks like they were just there and happened to take a picture. So this type of stuff makes your work more impactful, and it controls your visual progression. So you can control where the viewer is looking, which is a very straightforward point when it comes to lighting. And storytelling just allows you to, okay, the light makes you look there. Why am I looking there? And it should instantly be answered by what's there. So the next thing, which was like kind of the kicking off point of this conversation, was balanced exposure. So this is from Edgar Martinez, and if you grab like a gradient map of value for your image, you go black to white in your range, right? A lot of Last of Us tends to avoid the high point, like the white pixels, and a lot of that has to do with because Seattle's very gray. It's very overcast there, so it's very difficult for it to actually become extremely bright. And I guess we could be thankful that they picked that type of location, because as you expand and get into areas, no spoilers, of course, get into areas where lighting is brighter or the clouds clear, it gives you that ability to play with the range. So when I say balanced exposure, what I'm talking about is areas that are very dark and then areas that are very bright. You don't want any pixels to be completely black unless you know exactly what you're doing. Like if it's scary, if it's a scary game, and you need the viewer to be searching in the darkness, like it goes into that back alley and you can't see anything. That's scary, right? So that's a good use of going into the either black pixels or near black. So when I'm talking about these values, what I actually do is, and I'll show you guys how to do this in a few slides here. What I actually do is take this black to white range and map colors to it, just like you would in like Substance Designer, for example. And basically, what you want to do is avoid black in that range that I've drawn out, but then you also want to avoid like blue, unless maybe it's the sun, for example, or a light source. And you can see that's quite balanced, which is crazy. I assume this has a lot to do with the way that the lighting team is working there, but it's really cool to see nonetheless, and definitely illustrates like where the range is actually sitting. You can see it's much more red orange, and then a little bit of black just outside the shot, and the sun or ambient light from outside is just giving you a little bit of that green yellow. But yeah, so let's look at controlling your quality. And I don't know if Ben's still in chat, but maybe he'll have some comments on this. This is more of my perceived feeling on some of the stuff. But first of all, let's look at the movie render queue. So this is Unreal Engine, but it's just a plugin that's currently, I believe, in beta. Yeah, it says beta there. And yeah, I just show you how to like what to search for, turning that on, and then how you get to it from the Windows button up top. Now, the really nice thing about this render, this movie render queue, is you can actually, I don't know how many of you type in commands in Unreal, but you can actually add those commands into this render queue so that it actually occurs right before the render happens. So you don't have to sit there, type in all the commands, and then get it to go. And it kind of dips into the next topic that I want to talk about, which is anti-aliasing. You can see it on the top there in the settings window. So with anti-aliasing, you definitely get a much softer, smoother image, and you get less stepping on the edges. If we look at like this mesh, which is like the scene I'm currently working on, the edge with no anti-aliasing or temporal. I think it's temporal RT now. It could be. I'm trying to remember the name of the new one, but the new one basically does very similar approach with trying to smooth out your image so that it doesn't look so pixelated and gamey, if you want to call it that. Now, uh, for me, I like to render with anti-aliasing off, but you have to be careful about that pixel stepping. That stepping that you're seeing in the top image uh, will be visible at the original with the original image. Now, what you can do to negate this is called downsampling, which is basically if you were to render out, like we just bring up this next one, if you were to render out a 4K image and then scale it down to 2K with anti-aliasing off, you can get this a similar aliasing effect because when you shrink it down, it has to figure out how to like average the pixels because it's going to a fourth of its size. But the reason I like to do it, and I don't know if it's visible on stream here, Paul, you can let me know if not, but the anti-aliasing on the left and the no anti-aliasing on the right in the two images on the left side of the frame. The no anti-aliasing, you can see there's a lot more information happening on the inside of the material.
Hmm. You can see
And
that.
you can see it? Okay,
Yeah.
cool. I'm sure you'll be able to see it in the recording. But the or the PowerPoint when I hand it over.
Hmm. Yeah.
But if you have anti-aliasing off or on, you tend to lose that information just because it gets smudged up a bit while being processed by the temporal AA. Um, and yeah, so you can see on the right side, I've got no anti-aliasing 4K down to 2K, and then a anti-aliasing 4K down to 2K on the bottom uh, with AA on. So if we go between, I think I can go between these two, and it's especially noticeable on the gold. And I guess maybe because of the way Lumen works, I could be wrong, but with the no AA on, the gold seems to pop more because there's more information that's not being smudged, and that's actually affecting the bounce. You can see it on the top part of like that A shape or the upside down V.
Mm.
So I thought that was really interesting, and it really like even the stone surfaces at the bottom, you can really see it kind of like it's almost like you're adding a sharpening in Photoshop afterwards. But yeah, the last thing I wanted to touch on when it comes to this kind of quality control is where you can take post processing and what's considered quote unquote okay, right? So first of all, post process or post processing happens in Unreal Engine after everything, right? If you ever see particles floating around and they don't look like they're being blurred, particles are happening after post process. It's one of those rare occurrences you'll actually see it. You can just change that in the material and make it before post. But the point is I want to highlight that post processing is happening after you've rendered your image, and it is really cool if you can do as much of it as possible in Unreal Engine or in the engine that you're rendering in. But you can also, and it is okay, to do subtle manipulation in image processors like Photoshop. One of the more recent ones is DaVinci Resolve, since that one's free. You can go in and actually do a lot of like color grading and post work. Uh, they actually have a bloom that I think is so good that I think going forward I won't do bloom in Unreal and will actually do it in Resolve
Resolve's
just
crazy
because
powerful.
it's really nice.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I this slide, like I'm saying below, this could be a talk on its own. It's talking about bloom and depth of field, tone mapping. I would love to do a really deep dive into like composition and like playing with lenses and what that does to your frame of view. But we leave that for another time. And I'm sure there's some other people uh, that can talk even deeper than me on that topic. But yeah, it's totally okay to do post processing after you've gotten the renders out of Unreal Engine. Just don't lie about what you're doing. It's like if you need to Photoshop some like shadows to smooth them out. If it's like one spot that's kind of weird looking, go for it. If it's like the whole image and you're doing mass tweaks, I would probably go back and try and figure out what's wrong in Unreal instead. It'll probably save you time in the end. But yeah, so on this last topic, this is that Photoshop action script I was talking about. I don't know how many people have used action scripts, but I just wanted to highlight where you can go to access the gradient layer. And then it's just the color range that I've placed on top of that gradient layer essentially will remap all values under it to that gradient. And this is how I'm kind of getting that look. And I've also, it's largely inspired by, man, I always say his name wrong, Rogelio, I think.
Sounds close
Guy's
enough.
amazing.
Yeah.
Really good stuff. But he's got an ArtStation blog. There's a part 1 and a part 2 that covers very similar topics when it comes to albedo and lighting, uh, mainly for texturing values so that lighting looks correct for PBR scenes. I would definitely check out both those blog posts if you have not. And yeah, so you decide what we look at, right? And you also decide how we see it. And then from there is how we make up our mind on how awesome you are. Cool. That is me. That's my link tree to the Empire stuff and all of our Twitter things and links. But yeah, I can get on to questions now if you would like.
Yeah, dude, that was awesome. I've honestly like learned so much already. I genuinely mean that. That whole thing about the AA and sampling is really interesting. Like I've never really seen that before.
Mm.
So I think that's something I definitely want to experiment in. And just on DaVinci, before I forget, I just posted it in chat. Lighting Bot. Don't know if you're familiar with that guy. He's on Twitter.
Oh yeah,
They just released a really cool course on DaVinci for game art.
it's
Um,
pretty cheap as well, isn't it?
it's like $25, I think, from what I can
Yeah, and he
understand.
was saying it would scale
Yeah, it's gonna go up because he's gonna add
because
loads
he's
more.
it's in alpha or whatever.
Yeah. But I think that's something that people are interested in post processing. That's definitely something to look at because Resolve is it seems to be where it's at in regards to that.
With on that topic,
Mhm.
actually, just to shout out, there's so many communities now, which is
Yeah.
really cool.
Hmm.
But he does portfolio reviews as well about lighting. So if you
Yeah, he
ever
does.
want to
Yeah.
kind of dig into that, I think I was, what was it, last week or the week before? I was on his, no, not last week, the week before that one.
All
I
right.
was
Okay.
on his portfolio review. So it was him and myself just reviewing portfolios,
Ah,
and I was looking at the environment side of it, and he was looking at the lighting side.
that's super cool. He's a
It's
really
it
nice
was really
guy.
good.
Yeah, I've spoken
Yeah.
to him a few times. He's working on a book as well. He's doing like a lighting for game art book. Um,
Oh, that's awesome.
yeah, I've been talking to him a little bit about that as well. So he's a really cool dude. But yeah, we'll get stuck into questions because you're very popular and people have questions. But that was dope, man. That was really, really cool. Let me go back to the top.
Sweet. I'm glad you liked it. I'm always hypercritical
Nah,
of my.
that was
I'm like,
super
oh, is this gonna be?
super informative as always. And we'll drop your socials as well. I know you have your QR code, but we'll drop all your socials
Mm,
at the end of the
thank
chat
you.
as well. Okay, so first question is, I believe, from Nyla. I think I've gone back far enough. What is your advice for people that move to a new country for their jobs?
Oh man.
What is a good way to learn how to slow down? So it's actually two questions. That's question one, and then what is a good way to learn how to slow down when making portfolio
Where?
projects?
Hang
This is
on.
at
Where does this start?
1852 in the workshop chat.
I'm like, what year is that? Oh, right.
Uh,
1852. Okay, so
so Nyla.
oh my god, I don't even see it. Anyways, okay, so
It's under Joe's Jurassic Park picture. The guy with the
Jurassic
shades.
Park
The
picture.
guy with the shades.
Yeah.
Like just two down.
Oh my god, nope, I don't see it.
Oh man.
Anyways, so
Okay, I'll ask them. I'll do one at a time. So, what advice have you got for
oh, look at
people
that. I
moving to a
got
new country?
tagged.
Oh,
There we go. Thank you
oh,
very
there
much.
we go. Somebody gave you a question.
Dude, I'm just looking at a wall of text. I'm like, oh my god, I've never had to like scroll back. Uh yeah,
Oh, it's
so
probably
what is your
1952.
advice?
Sorry, the time's wrong because of time differences. That's probably what it is.
Yeah. No, it's
Ah,
it's
there we
cool.
go. Sorry.
That's yeah, time. What is
Time
time?
is yeah, time is weird.
What is your advice for people that move to a new country for their jobs? What is a good way to learn to slow down while making portfolio pieces concerning pressures to get a job? Man, that last one, that's pretty tough because like I'll start with that one because
Mm-hmm.
I remember I got into the industry and I was in the industry for about 4 months, and then the like housing market crashed, and then
Right.
I was laid off within like a few months,
Oh, oof.
and it was like the entire industry was bleeding.
Oh,
Um, and so I was like fresh out of school, technically, right?
mm-hmm.
And there's the concern and pressure to like get that job, like land on your feet. Um, I mean the reality is we have to accept that we can only put so much time into it while maintaining a healthy like balance.
Mm-hmm.
And the more you tip into the side that is like a stressful, pushing yourself harder than you should, the more it actually affects your ability to perform at building content for your portfolio,
Mm-hmm.
which leads to more pressure, and it kind of turns into this vicious cycle. So I think I think being part of communities or a group of people
Yeah.
that can watch out for each other, as well as getting like positive feedback, helps like boost the battery. You know what I mean? It makes you feel good. It makes you
Yeah.
feel like oh, okay, I'm making progress, because then a critique turns into like an action. And then if it's the end of the day, like setting good time limits for yourself for how much you work on art a day is important.
Mm-hmm.
And if you leave like that last bit of time to like get the feedback, you can process that feedback, and then you know what to tackle the next day, for example.
Right.
So there's those aspects, but there's not really a right or a wrong answer on that, or like the perfect answer,
Yeah.
because every person's going to be a little different with that.
Yeah.
Um, with the advice on people moving to a new country, I I highly suggest. Man, what is the name of that website? Here, I'm going to stop sharing my
Yeah. Yeah. No problems.
screen here, and I'm going to find that website. But there's a website that does price matching, cost of
Oh,
living.
yeah. The one you used for the Sweden thing whenever I was talking to you way back.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
man,
Yeah.
it's a Numio. I think it's called Numio. Here you go. I'll just drop it in the chat
Sounds
here.
about right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so with Numio, you can say where you live, and then you can say where you want to go or the place you're curious about, and it'll give you like a cost comparison between the two locations. And then it'll also like revert it back to like converting it to your currency and say, okay, if you want to live the same way you're living now, but over there, you're going to need to make this much, which is really, it's quite detailed, like almost disturbingly detailed in
Yeah.
what you're looking at. But yeah, so there's that site. But the other thing I would suggest is if you're moving jobs to another studio, I would ask the, let's say a recruiter, you're working with a recruiter, you get hired. I would suggest asking them if there is a network of people at that company that help people coming in from abroad, because they will likely have a group of other people that went through the same thing.
Yep.
I know for a fact it's like that at Massive. And from there, you can go in and like grab all of that information. They can give you links to things that you would have never been able to find,
Yep.
or just an understanding of like, oh, you came from there. I'm from that country too. This was really weird and this is strange. And like, you'll get used to it, but make sure don't forget about this. And yeah, it helps shortcut a lot of the learning by mistakes
Yeah.
process that would happen once you get there, because it's not going to be perfect.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. Definitely. I think people that have obviously, you're not going to be the first person to have done that in most cases. So there will be people who have maybe gone through what you're going through right there.
Mm.
Uh, cool. Cool. Okay. The next questions I think are from me. So
Yeah.
yeah, 1905
Oh yeah, I see it.
2005. So I've got two. So most common issues. You've touched on a lot of stuff. So these were maybe like asked before you went through a lot of the slides. So that obviously you've gone through things. But like, what do you think the most common issues that you see with portfolios are? Like you do a lot of critiques on your stream and stuff. You see these things probably quite regularly. What do you think is the most common Like the
Mm.
really frequent thing that you see quite persistently in portfolios that's sort of like an issue.
I guess it would be asset breakdowns not being like
Done.
clean enough, or like they're either not there,
Hmm.
or like I don't know what you made and what you didn't make,
Right.
because that's totally a topic on every piece now, right? Unless
Hmm.
they straight up say like, oh yeah, I made everything.
Yeah.
And I, just to be on the record for it, it's totally fine to like use
Packs and stuff.
asset packs,
Hmm.
and yeah. But yeah, I think it's that, and
Okay.
just not really doing much breakdowns. Like I know, like I highlighted breakdowns pretty heavily in the presentation,
Hmm.
but it also, like, I'm not expecting you to do a wireframe and a texture breakdown of every single asset of an environment, right?
Yeah.
But if you're a props artist, that you should definitely have that in there. I've seen people get passed up just because they didn't show their wireframes,
Hmm. Hmm.
which is which sounds crazy, and I thought it was crazy, but now that's why I emphasize it, because I actually asked props leads from
Yeah.
multiple studios and got that response.
Show your topology. Yeah. Hmm. That makes sense. And then this is something we've mentioned before. I know I talked to you about this like in the past. I just wanted to kind of know if you still think it's relevant. So obviously your portfolio should be like your best self, so your best work. But do you still think it's worthwhile to have like older work on your portfolio? So like I see a lot, like you've talked about this again in your streams quite a bit, and you talked about like the
Mm,
progression. Like you look at somebody a year ago and you look at them now, and you can clearly see that they've leveled up. But
yeah,
maybe that last piece is like not really reflective of their ability. But is it still worthwhile? Do you think having that kind of work on there as like a comparison to where they are right now?
it's it's so interesting because, like,
Hmm.
I think the professional community is divided on it.
Yeah,
Um, like Josh Lynch, for example, he thinks it's really cool to have one. I think it's fine.
yeah,
I'm not opposed to it. Um, I think even in my portfolio, if you go down to the very end, it's like literally like stuff from like 360 days or something like
yeah,
that. Um, but I mean, I think it's worthwhile just because you see the growth, like you're saying.
yeah.
If you're really concerned about it, then it's more about you either being okay with it,
Hmm.
or you need to do something so that you feel more comfortable with your portfolio. Because at the end of the day, you just need to be confident in your portfolio. And if it bugs you that something is old on your portfolio, you can hide it.
Yeah,
You can put it in a blog post somewhere. It doesn't have to be on ArtStation blogs either. You can have it somewhere stored on like WordPress or something, right?
yeah.
Um,
But it's not your
but
portfolio. Yeah,
yeah, I don't really, I don't mind.
yeah. I think it's healthy as well. Like personally speaking, I think it's like I
Mm,
think even for the artists themselves, it can be good because it's a reminder for you about your own personal progression. You know, like sometimes, like
hmm.
obviously, like if you're very well established, that's maybe less of an issue. But if you're a junior or somebody looking for work, I think it can be very healthy for you as a person to kind of pop onto your own portfolio and kind of go, ah, you know what? Like 8 months ago, that's what I made, and that's what I made last week, and you can clearly see the difference. So for me, I think it's a good thing. But I just wanted to see what you thought about it as well.
Yeah.
Um, cool. Okay. Interesting. Got a couple more questions. Let me see. The value check thing.
Yes, I'm
That's
opening Photoshop right now.
nice. Just to go through it because I know this is very handy for people to be aware of.
Yeah, it's I mean, it's pretty straightforward, and I'll
Hmm.
show you making it like an action as well.
Cool.
Okay, let me share again here. Can you see Photoshop?
Let me see. Jeremy. Yes.
Yeah. All right. Cool. So um, there's a little tab here called Actions, right? But I guess Windows and Actions is right here, or Alt F9. Um, Actions just record everything that you do. So, for example, I have an action that just does post bloom. So it converts it to a smart object. It does a Gaussian blur, sets current layer, and then make an invert. Here, I'll just play it and see what happens here. Oh, right. I have to 2 seconds. I have to do the layer first. But basically I duplicate the layer and then I just run the script, and then it preps a layer for me to just paint the
Ah,
bloom already done,
yeah.
and then I can just control like, so it does everything I would have done in steps.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, so let's just dive into this thing here. So you go down here, you click gradient. Oh no, not gradient. Hang on here. Oh, what is happening? I mean, did I forget how to do it? This is classic. Yeah, gradient map. I'm just double checking here before I.
There's gradient map as well, I think, at the bottom.
I think that's the one I'm looking for. Yeah,
Yeah.
there it is. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. So basically, just by doing gradient map, you then have this mapping that you can mess with. And when you move this around, you can see it kind of, it changes things. So what I can do is grab this. We'll make this black, and then I'll click another point here. Oh, I just made this not black. So this one, we can make this one like red. We can do like blue. And then it doesn't look obvious yet, so we'll just add some other values here. Maybe we'll make this one yellow. So you basically, what I'm trying to do is highlight like where highlights are, and where it's starting to peak.
Mm-hmm.
And you can move these around as well. But you can save this as like a preset. Now, the nice thing is this: if you are in the action script, you can just go in here. I'll just tear this off, and then if you make a new one, we'll just call this like Pog,
Mm-hmm.
and now it's recording, right?
Yeah.
And then we could go here, gradient map, and then I don't know if we can just do like this color here. So I've applied that gradient map set already, and you
Mm-hmm.
can see all of that's been recorded. And then I can stop on the recording, and now I just have this Pog, so I could go in, just drag an image in, click on Pog, and then hit play,
Yeah.
and it'll just get it all set up for you.
And that's
Dude, I'm
pretty.
so glad you pointed out the gradient map
Yeah.
down there. I'm like, my brain's like, what's going on?
It's because I have the script from your Patreon. Um,
Oh,
so I've been practicing.
oh yeah. If you don't want to, yeah, if you don't want to make it yourself, you can
You can
go on
get
the Patreon and grab
borrow
it.
one. Yeah. But that's really useful then, because then obviously that maps to your 0 to 1, your white to black, and you can kind of see
Mm.
what's peaking and stuff. Yeah.
I was talking earlier as well about creating smart objects, and the reason for it. Here, I'll show you. If you duplicate a layer and just do convert to smart object,
Mm-hmm.
now you can scale this super small, and you can see it's like getting pixelated because it's so small.
Mm-hmm.
But because it's a smart object, you can scale it back up, and it retains its information.
Ah.
So it stays. It's very handy. It stays protected. And if it's a smart object, everything you do to it, filter wise, for example, is like a layer on its own.
So it's
So I
not
can go in
destructible.
and like control it later. So it's
Yeah.
like non-destructive in that sense.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. Thank you. Okay. You can probably see these yourself, but the next question is from Jackie.
Yeah.
Is a detailed breakdown, e.g., wireframes, texture maps, sizes, all that good stuff, helpful even if it may expose weaknesses? As in, if I show my wireframes and they're not perfect, and let's say I don't know better yet, would it still be better than showing none at all?
Oh, that's a really good question.
Mm-hmm.
So this all kind of plays into like what is your fears, right? If you're really scared about it, a job decline,
Mm-hmm.
then this will scratch just a little bit more in the back of your head of if I should do it or not. I think it's good to have it there because if you're applying to a studio that's really good for um, getting back to you, they will let you know why they didn't take you up on your position. And also with these small changes of stuff like, oh, your metalness map is like has gray values in it. That's a common one I see, right?
Yeah.
Or like your albedos are too saturated, or the way you're dealing with the albedo of your metals is wrong.
Yep.
Um, Wrong doesn't mean you're not getting the job, right? It might be like with those small things, that's something you can teach someone on the job within like the first week.
Right.
So
Mm-hmm.
um, I would say it's good to post it because even if it's not for the job position, it'll be someone looking at your portfolio or a friend in like XYZ or the Empire or other servers um, commenting on behalf of like future applications, right? They're going to be like, "Oh yeah, no, you're that map's built wrong. Like you got to watch out for that."
Yeah. I guess get critique on it before you post, so
Yeah, if
you
it's a
feel
concern.
confident. Yeah, like if it's something
Yeah,
you're
if it's a
unsure
concern.
about, put it through for critique. That would be, I guess, one way to overcome that, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, um, but yeah, interesting question. Okay, question from Bobby: when starting your portfolio, what kind of props should you try and make to give a good basis for other props?
Oh man.
That's a that's a tough one. That's a big question, right? That's like it depends on what you want to do, I guess. So this is one of my students. I guess it depends on what area you want to go into, like a weapon artist versus a whatever artist.
So the question was basically like, what's the prop that you should start with?
I guess yeah. What kind of prop should you try and make to give a good basis for the other props? I'm not quite
I mean,
sure what that means, but yeah.
it's really it's a that's a weird one because it depends. It depends.
Mhm.
Comment.
Mhm.
It really depends on like what direction do you want to go, right? So if you want to be a hard surface artist
Yep.
and you want to be making like sci-fi scenes that are just huge environments of hard surface,
Mhm.
maybe doing hard surface is like a good direction. If it's not hard surface, uh, I usually prefer assets that see a lot of what is it? They're understood from everyone in the world usually,
Yep.
like a fire hydrant.
Uh huh.
Ben's probably laughing at me real hard right now. Fire hydrants, man.
I
So
mean,
everyone knows what
what?
a fire hydrant is.
Yeah.
They know what they look like. They come in all different shapes and sizes. They also get painted. They get stickers on them, graffiti. They sit there in the weather, they get rained on. So there's all of this interaction that happens. So it's
Mhm.
not just about the modeling of it, but the texturing.
Mhm.
If it's not that, I mean, I think this is why material artists like brick walls as well. Not only is it like a challenge to figure out how to do that in a node setup, but it's also there's so much nuances to all of the materials and how they interact with each other and the
Mhm.
variations in roughness.
Mhm.
Getting variation uh, is is probably the thing you want to be looking at. Variation
Mhm.
in your roughness, variation in materials, storytelling in the surfaces. When you're doing a single prop, it's all storytelling on the surface instead of an environment.
Yeah.
Um,
The roughness
yeah.
variation stuff came up a lot. Even I remember back to my mentorship that I did with you. That was one of the things that you picked out as like an area to like look at and work on. I think that's super important, with regardless of what you actually model. Like material definition,
Hmm.
can be very important as well. But yeah, cool.
Yeah, I'm
Uh,
trying to think of what else you could say on that. I
I
mean,
mean,
the ultimate answer is make what you want.
yeah,
Because if you're really into what you're modeling, you're gonna model it better.
yeah,
You're gonna texture it better if you're interested in it.
yeah. That makes sense as well. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Thomas has a question, which he says may be hard to answer, but how much more do you expect from a mid versus a junior when it comes to portfolio? Do your
Oh,
priorities
interesting.
change?
I mean, those so if someone's mid, so I heard this actually the other day. The confusion of between, I say intermediate, but
Mm-hmm.
some say mid level,
Mm-hmm.
and some say artist level two, environment artist level two. Um, I just want to say all of that because they're all the same thing.
Yeah, yeah,
But yeah, so studios will come up with all types of names. Uh, but I guess the difference between a junior and a intermediate or mid level, I think it's just that like the material stuff that I was highlighting, you would likely not see that. Bakes would probably look much better in an intermediate portfolio. Um,
maybe more optimization consideration.
yeah, I mean, not necessarily. It depends if they're already. I guess they've been in a studio, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
they're intermediate,
Mm-hmm.
and if they've been in a studio, they likely have a project on their portfolio as well,
True. Mm-hmm.
or some type of it, like their portfolio is going to be. I would find it really strange if I saw an intermediate portfolio that didn't have a direction that they wanted to go in. That would
Okay.
be really weird to me. Like, oh, this person is totally into like mechs
Mm-hmm.
and like mech environments for mechs. If if it was a junior, maybe it's not so clear yet, but you can tell it's kind of heading in that way. But intermediate, they're on it. They know exactly what they're interested in.
Okay. Yeah,
But
that's
yeah,
interesting. Yeah, yeah.
it's not yeah, it's not cut and dry.
Yeah, I guess it varies greatly from studio to studio as well. Like a mid
Hmm.
in wherever studio A is perhaps very different from a mid in studio B, even though they have the same job title. Like what they're responsible for and what they've done experience wise could be vastly different.
Yeah, and
Uh,
that can change a lot. Like in Sweden, for example, from what I've noticed of other studios, not just ours, is a junior once they're kind of comfortable, they just kind of get whatever they're interested in,
hmm,
and like everyone's just kind of pulling from the same plate. So a lot of the times, juniors are literally operating like intermediate,
okay, interesting.
and it's just a matter of time until they're intermediate.
Yeah, cool. Hopefully that answers the question a little bit. There's a couple more, so next one, try and get through these. Is there any key to choosing what assets you should break down in your environment? So this is from B.
Mm. Oh yeah, I see that one.
So B is currently working on a museum uh, environment, and I guess there's obviously like a variety of props. Is there any way that you would kind of like focus on, or what should you focus on in deciding which ones to show a breakdown of?
Usually, I mean, usually it's going to be the asset that's either the hero prop or the
Mm-hmm.
thing that you're focusing on in the scene.
Mm-hmm.
That's that's the one I would break down. If there's something that you're like really proud of as well, like this sounds strange, but if there's cardboard boxes, right,
Yeah.
in your scene for whatever reason, and the way you approached building those cardboard boxes makes them highly reusable, really cheap, and they're quite optimized, maybe you want to do a breakdown of that because you're really proud of it. There's not really um,
Yeah.
a wrong answer in what you break down, but
Okay.
I would definitely focus on doing at least a breakdown of
Hero.
the yeah that hero prop.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Okay. Regarding wireframes, should we use black lines on a white material, or is it okay to have lines over the textured asset?
All right, it's usually about readability.
Okay. So as long as it's clear to see your topology, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah,
Okay, cool.
don't go too low res.
Yeah, keep it.
Wireframes at low res, man, it's brutal.
Yeah, I can imagine that would be a bit messy. Okay, yeah. Joe has a question. How important is it to show work in progress GIFs videos from block out to final form for an environment art portfolio?
So I wouldn't say that those are required, but man, when I see them, it kind of makes you
They pop off.
excited.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get excited. Like it's not no like if I think as someone reads that question, then they realize how valuable it is. I don't think people realize how good it is to have in your portfolio. It's not required, but if I see it, it'll add extra points because I'll see how you thought about like, oh, they were working on that composition and then they moved some props around. Oh wow, the composition's way stronger. There's something clicked there.
Yeah.
And that just happened in that GIF, that frame.
I remember Jasmine did that with one of her portfolios. I think it was one of her pieces, one of the ones before the wait, before the remember the windmill one or the house with the windmill that Jasmine did.
Yes.
She did like a progress gif on that, and it for me it was just like it was just crazy good because it just showcased the whole evolution, the whole journey through the making of
Oh,
the thing.
that's the one she talked about on
On your
yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah. And I think you know did the same. You know Chen did the same.
Hmm.
She did a talk on your on the DinCon thing, and it was the same kind of thing where it was like showcasing the whole kind of like logistics or logic behind how things happened. And I think that can be
Dude,
super
it's cool.
useful. Yeah,
I honestly I think if you could get an interview
yeah. Mhm.
like kind of like that where
Mhm.
you do a video of like breaking down your scene,
Mm.
that would be
Oh,
sick.
hella cool. Yeah,
That's like extra work, but
yeah. but a
You know,
nice benefit if you can do it for sure.
yeah.
Okay, I think there's two more, Jeremy. We tend to talk about stylized and realistic art. I tweeted about this today. But what is your opinion about adding low poly art on your portfolio? Do you think it's a downgrade to the portfolio or not?
No, it's not. That's
Hmm.
crazy.
Yeah,
But I guess it's crazy to think about it like that. Like it would be a downgrade, because if you're going stylized, man, did you look at Somerville,
yeah, yeah,
dude?
yeah.
I haven't seen a game that gorgeous.
It's
Like I
beautiful.
would put that game on the same level as Last of Us,
Yeah, that's totally
and
fair.
for different reasons. You know what I mean? Like,
Totally
man,
fair.
the framing and like having a camera move through the scene in like one pass. Oh my
Very
gosh.
cinematography's crazy in that game. Yeah. No, I totally agree. I think it just depends on the art style. Like you can get a really good
Mm.
poly low res stuff that looks great. So I totally agree. Yeah, that makes sense.
I would actually say I bet low poly art
Yeah.
is arguably harder
Yeah.
in like in other ways, because like if you go low poly, you really have to nail the silhouette of something or the way it's perceived just by its shape and with the few verts that you have.
Yeah. I
It's
mean,
not easy.
it goes
It's
back to
harder in different ways, right?
yeah, it's that old classic thing of that sometimes people like sort of argue the case that stylized is easy versus realistic.
Mm,
And it's like it's just not true. Like it's so untrue because you look at the art that's out there and it's jaw droppingly beautiful, and it's crazy like in terms of the shader work and the things people do. Like it's every bit as valid, if not more valid, in some ways than realistic art.
hmm.
I think realism just has that kind of like I don't know that air of immediate wowness. Like because you kind of like look at it and goes that looks real, and you kind of go wow that looks real. But with stylized because it doesn't look realistic, it has that initial kind of thing of it's not what I expect to see. It's something different and unique. But I think it's beautiful. Like some of my favorite games from this year, kind of Bridge of Spirits. Like some of the games I played this year that I loved were all stylized art. Um,
Oh, interesting.
and I,
I think it's gonna grow more.
I think so as well. I think so as well for sure. Okay, got two more. I think. Jack. No, I have asked. Oh, Jackie's. Yeah. Could I apply for a prop artist position with environment art pieces in my portfolio, or should I restructure my portfolio to highlight props alone?
Ah, I mean, so an environment is just a collection of props laid out in a way where they relate to each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think an environment artist should be able to get a props position if they're highlighting their props well inside of their environment posts.
Mm-hmm.
If you really kind of want to split that up, you could. Um, but I think just doing a few breakdowns of the main prop or secondary props that you want to break down in each of your environment posts would be enough. You should be able to do both positions with that.
Cool. Makes sense. And I think the last question is from Melissa. Uh, if you never have been a junior officially and did not really have that kind of official training either, sorry, the screen just moved. How do you know when to apply for mid positions? Will people ask you
Mm.
that, or can you just apply for a mid position and see what happens?
So if you happily, just to like highlight this right off the bat, if you happily keep working, you'll get the position upgrade or title bump much slower,
Hmm.
because people aren't ignoring you, but they have their own worlds they're dealing with.
Yep.
And like, it's really important to highlight where you want to go and what you need to do in order to do that. So, like, for example, if I was your lead, Melissa, what I would probably do is ask you, like, okay, what are your, like, in a one on one, like, what are your ambitions? Where do you feel like you're at right now? And what do you feel like you're weak at? And how do you want to get to the next thing? And what is the next thing? And if you tell me that mid position is the next thing, then we can come to an agreement on like a handful of things that I feel like you would need to do or prove in order to move up to that next role. And it might just be time, right? Maybe there isn't really anything to do, and it's just like, oh, I didn't even realize that you were like shooting for that. But I mean, you meet it, so let's get that moving. Um, the comment on official training as a junior, it's funny because I don't think there really is any official training. It's just kind of you're now in the water with everyone else learning the things. And official training, I guess you would call like onboarding, onto a project or a team or both, right? And uh, onboarding can be really bumpy or it can be really smooth and well done. Either way, at some point you'll have become integrated with the team, and you've got you got your quote unquote official training in some way or another, and now you're operating as like another part of the machine in that sense. Hopefully that answers the question.
How long do you think typically it takes, Jeremy, or is that too much of a vague question? So like the transition from junior to mid.
In an active environment, junior to mid, it can depend on the person, but if they're growing quite quickly
Mm-hmm.
and they're kind of already acting pretty autonomously and they're taking on feedback really well, and uh not only like not getting defensive about it, but like actually taking on the feedback and kind of getting it in the first two times,
Yeah.
first or second time, it's it's kind of like, I guess it would be junior to mid would be like 2 to 3 years,
Yeah.
maybe.
Mm-hmm.
It could be less than that. It really depends, but yeah, it can be three or less.
Yeah, because it seems to vary a lot. Like
Mm,
talking to people, like I've seen people, like we both know Alex Beddoes. Like I'm pretty sure he
hmm.
went from like junior to senior like within like 18 months,
Yeah,
and that's like obviously that's very quick, obviously, but like it just seems to vary a great deal from company to company, and I'm always just
yeah,
curious
it
about
can depend.
yeah, like some people do it in a year, some people take 3 years, like you said. It just seems to be very varied, depending on where you work. And I often just wondered like why is that? Why is it 3 years in this company and a year in this company? It just seems a bit
Yeah,
vast in terms of the difference. Um, but yeah, I guess it just depends on who your lead is, what the company structure is, how they work, and stuff like that as well.
yeah, it's really funny because I totally agree with Alex getting senior so quickly,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
because he was able to prove certain elements very quickly, and he also was a lead at one point, um,
Yeah.
for
Um.
why am I forgetting the name?
Yes, the God fighting game. Uh.
No, it was an outsourcing company before that.
Oh, was it before that?
Yeah,
Oh. Oh.
Decagon. I believe he was
Oh, was
doing
he
lead
lead?
stuff
Oh.
there.
Oh, I didn't know
But
that.
either way, it's like that could lead to that really quickly because of those
Yeah.
skill sets, right? Um, I think one thing that we should always watch out for is accelerating someone too quickly as well,
Yeah.
because not everyone will be able to do what Alex has done.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, like for example, if I wanted to be a director, I feel strange being a director if I haven't been a lead yet, because I need to understand the perspective of a
Yeah.
lead
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
before I become a director, because then I can, when leads are coming to me asking me questions, I can understand where they're coming from.
All right. Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense, dude. That was fantastic as always. I think that's all the questions answered. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with everyone. Jeremy's socials are in the workshop chat, so you can find a link to his community homepage, which is of course the Dynasty Empire. His Twitch. Jeremy streams Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And
Right now I'm doing twice, but
oh,
yeah,
okay. So
Monday and Wednesdays and Thursdays usually. Yeah.
usually Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, and his Twitter and ArtStation are there as well. So if you're not following him already, I'm sure many of you are. But if you're not, drop Jeremy a follow. But yeah, thank you very much, dude. That was amazing. Really, really
Yeah, that
informative.
was
Really,
super
really
fun.
useful. Yeah, I think a lot of people are going to benefit from that. So I really appreciate it.